Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into the ideas of one of history's greatest thinkers, Albert Einstein.
It's going to be quite a journey.
Definitely. For this conversation, we've pulled together a whole range of materials: personal letters, essays, bits from interviews, reflections he made throughout his life.
Yeah, a real treasure trove. It's amazing how much he wrote beyond just physics.
Exactly. Our mission here is really to, mine those gems of wisdom, those insights that sometimes catch you off guard. We'll explore Einstein's mind, looking beyond the physics, how he connected science, nature, politics, religion, even like the human condition itself.
All in a relaxed conversational way, right? Just
Yeah.
exploring the ideas.
Precisely. For you listening in, curious like us, the goal is to unpack what really mattered to Einstein beyond EP Ward, maybe connecting his thoughts in ways you haven't considered before.
So get ready for some aha moments, maybe a fresh perspective on things.
It's fascinating how we almost instantly picture Einstein with physics, relativity, that famous equation.
Totally. The wild hair, the EMCA, it's iconic.
But when you start digging into his other writings, the letters, you see this much broader, richer worldview. It's like his genius just spilled over into everything.
It really did. It's surprising for many to find out he thought so deeply about such varied topics.
We have this sort of stereotype, right? The slightly eccentric genius maybe sticking his tongue out for that photo.
Right.
We forget about the universe of ideas bubbling inside that head about society, our place in the cosmos.
Absolutely. And, even back in 1914, in a letter to his friend Heinrich Zanger, he offered this really poetic reflection on nature.
Oh, yeah. What did he say?
He wrote, "Nature shows us only the tail of the lion, but I do not doubt that the lion belongs to it, even though he cannot reveal himself to the eye all at once because of his enormous size."
Wow. It's quite an image. The tail of the lion.
Right. What does that metaphor make you think?
Okay, let's unpack that lion. For me, that tail we see feels like everything we have discovered about the universe, the laws of physics we understand.
The known parts.
But the whole lion, the part we can't see yet because it's so huge, that must be all the stuff we don't understand. The mystery's still out there.
Yeah, the vast unknown.
It's like he's saying science, no matter how advanced, is just a tiny glimpse of a much bigger, more complex reality.
But he doesn't doubt the lion is there.
Exactly. Even without seeing the whole thing, he had this faith, this conviction that there is an underlying order, a fundamental beauty. And that search is still going on, isn't it? We keep discovering things, and every discovery just opens up more questions.
Perfectly put. It's a view that balances that thirst for knowledge with a healthy dose of humility, recognizing there's always more to learn.
He admired the beauty and order, but understood our limits in grasping it all at once. And that enormous size really suggests the depth of these mysteries. Each discovery is just scratching the surface.
And that intellectual humility, that openness to the unknown, seems like a thread running through so many of his thoughts.
Definitely. Jumping ahead a bit, to 1917, still writing to Zanger, he drops this bombshell about technology and civilization. Brace yourself for this one.
Okay, I'm ready.
He said, all of our lauded technological progress and civilization generally could be compared to an axe in the hand of a pathological criminal.
Oof, wow. That's incredibly stark. An axe, a potentially useful tool, becoming deadly dangerous in the wrong hands.
Right. What hits you most about that analogy?
It's that technology itself isn't the guarantee of a better future. It all comes down to how we use it, our ethics, our societal values.
It's chillingly relevant today, isn't it? Thinking about AI, autonomous weapons.
Totally. Technology races ahead, but our ability to handle the implications, to make responsible choices, doesn't keep pace. His warning from over a century ago feels incredibly urgent right now.
No kidding. And his critical eye wasn't just on technology. Even when talking about science itself, he had this interesting perspective on how theories actually work.
Yes. Also in 1917, he said something really fundamental about the fate of a scientific theory.
What was that?
The fairest destiny of a physical theory is to point the way to the establishment of a more inclusive theory in which it lives on as a limiting case.
That's profound. How do you read that?
For me, he's saying no scientific theory is the final word, set in stone. Each one is a step, an advance that leads us to a more complete understanding.
So even when a theory gets, superseded by a broader one, it doesn't just vanish.
Exactly. It still holds its value within a specific context as a limiting case. It's a very humble yet optimistic view of science, isn't it? That we're always learning, always evolving.
Yeah, it's like seeing science as this collective building project. Each theory is a brick helping construct something bigger.
Precisely. He valued that continuous progress, that openness. Science isn't dogma, it's a dynamic process of refining and expanding what we know. Each theory is just a temporary piece in a massive puzzle.
And that open mind also showed up in his views on political figures. There's a quote about Lenin that's pretty complex, shows how he could see different sides.
Yes, one that really demonstrates his nuanced analysis, avoiding simple labels. He said, "In Lenin, I honor a man who completely sacrificed his own person and devoted all his energy to the realization of social justice. I do not find his methods advisable, but one thing is certain. Men of this type are the guardians and restorers of the conscience of mankind."
What stands out to you there?
Well, he acknowledges Lenin's motivation, that drive for social justice. He admired that dedication.
But he explicitly calls out the methods as not advisable.
Right. And that final part, calling him a guardian and restorer of the conscience of mankind, suggests that despite disagreeing with the how, he saw value in figures who challenged the status quo for a fairer world.
It's a very measured take, separating the ideal from the practice, the intention from the methods, without getting stuck on ideology.
Exactly. He could admire the dedication while still having serious reservations about the approach. It shows a thoughtful political perspective.
And that concern for social justice was definitely a constant theme for him, as we'll see later. But going back to nature for a moment, there's this slightly enigmatic answer he gave about nature's secret.
Ah, yes. When asked what he meant by an earlier statement, he replied, "Nature hides her secret because of her essential loftiness, but not by means of ruse." Intriguing phrase, right? Led to different takes over the years.
Definitely. Some people think he meant nature's subtlety, the depth of its mysteries that required genuine, tireless effort to uncover. Others see it more like nature is maybe a bit mischievous, but not deceitful. Like, it doesn't try to trick us. It's just inherently complex. Its laws aren't always obvious. Which interpretation feels more Einstein to you?
You know, the fascinating thing is, both might hold some truth within his worldview. The essential loftiness could point to the inherent complexity of natural laws. They don't reveal themselves easily.
Right, they demand effort.
And the idea of no ruse suggests nature is honest in its mysteries. The answers are there, waiting to be found through rigorous investigation. It's like he's saying nature doesn't play dirty, but it doesn't just hand over the answers either.
Yeah, speaking of discoveries that change everything, there's that famous story about the insight he had about free fall while working at the patent office. That's almost legendary in science.
Oh, absolutely. One of those eureka moments showing how profound ideas can spring from simple, everyday observations. He recalled, "If a person falls freely, they will not feel their own weight." I was startled. This simple thought made a deep impression on me. It impelled me toward the theory of gravitation.
What strikes me is the spontaneity and the immediate deep impact it had on him. A seemingly mundane observation about a common sensation led to a revolution in understanding gravity.
It really shows how crucial curiosity is, that ability to be surprised by the world around us. Sometimes we're so used to things we miss those sparks of insight.
And he emphasized it was a simple thought that hit him so hard. It reinforces that idea that often the most powerful insights are the ones that capture the essence of something clearly and concisely. Doesn't have to be super complicated.
Exactly. The key might be right there in everyday life if we just keep our minds open enough to see its significance.
Now, a topic that always sparks a lot of discussion about Einstein is his view on God and the universe. He left quite a few quotes that show a very particular perspective, one that often surprises people.
Yes, a view quite removed from traditional ideas of a personal God who intervenes directly. He famously said in 1943, "God does not play dice with the world."
And earlier, in 1930, he stated, "I am not an atheist. I don't know if I can define myself as a pantheist."
Plus, he used that well-known parable of the library to illustrate our limited ability to comprehend the universe. What do these different statements suggest to you about his beliefs?
Okay, that God doesn't play dice. One is usually taken as showing his belief in order, in predictability, in deterministic laws governing everything.
Right, a rejection of fundamental randomness.
His hesitation about being called a pantheist shows a reluctance to be boxed in by labels. And that library parable is powerful, isn't it? We see the order, sense, and intelligence behind it all. But our understanding is like a child's in a vast library, knowing someone wrote the books, but not understanding the language or the full system.
And his admiration for Spinoza's pantheism is key, too. Spinoza saw God as nature, immanent within the universe.
Yeah, so it seems like his view was more of a God revealed in the laws of nature, a cosmic force present in everything, rather than a transcendent being pulling strings from above. Spinoza's idea of God and nature being one resonated with Einstein's search for a unified understanding of the cosmos.
Exactly. Finding a logic behind all the complexity.
And that relentless search for understanding also shaped his view on the role of theory in observation. He has strong opinions here, especially regarding quantum mechanics, which he viewed with some skepticism.
Yes, in 1926, during a lecture by Heisenberg, one of the pioneers of quantum mechanics, Einstein pushed back against the focus on observables in the new theory. He argued, whether you can observe a thing or not depends on the theory which you use. It is the theory which decides what can be observed.
What's the implication of that for how we see science?
To me, it positions theory not just as a passive reflection of reality, but as a kind of lens through which we view the world. Our conceptual frameworks, our theories actually shape what we look for and how we interpret what we see.
So there's no such thing as purely neutral observation, completely detached from a theoretical framework, like the theory is the map guiding the explorer.
Exactly. It highlights the active role of the human mind in constructing scientific knowledge. Theory isn't just a mirror, it's an active tool that guides our investigation and shapes our understanding. Different theories can lead scientists to ask different questions and consequently observe different things.
Shifting gears a bit, Einstein lived through a tumultuous 20th century. He had some really interesting reflections on his own era and how science was developing then.
Yeah, he actually described the era as Gothic in its spirit, contrasting it with the Renaissance. And he talked about the 20th century establishing a democracy of the intellect. What do you think he meant by those striking metaphors?
The comparison to Gothic style, often linked to grand collective structures, maybe suggests he saw 20th century science as more of a collaborative effort than the Renaissance, which was marked by a few towering geniuses who kind of revolutionized thought almost single-handedly.
That makes sense. And the democracy of the intellect.
That reinforces the idea that scientific knowledge was becoming more widespread, that many people were contributing, raising the overall level of scholarship.
Precisely. He observed that while the general level of scientific understanding was higher than ever, maybe there weren't as many individual giants standing head and shoulders above everyone else, like a Galileo or a Newton. He saw the 20th century as a time when the collective effort, the epoch itself, was maybe more important than any single individual in building knowledge.
And that view of collective effort kind of connects to his observations about Americans and their dedication to scientific research, something that seemed to really impress him.
Yes, he was quite struck by what he saw in the U.S. He noted, in the United States, more than anywhere else, the individual is lost in the achievements of the many. American scholarship is painstakingly patient and industrious. The American student is not interested in dollars, nor even in success as such, but in his task, the object of the search.
What surprised me there is how it kind of debunks the stereotype of Americans being solely focused on money and individual success. He saw a genuine devotion to science, a focus on the pursuit of knowledge itself.
He praised the patience and meticulousness of American researchers, especially in fields like astronomy. It seems he saw an ideal of research there that he really valued.
Yeah, it highlights that dedication to long-term research, driven by curiosity, which is a key part of American scientific culture.
Now, moving into more philosophical territory, Einstein had some intriguing thoughts on free will and determinism that show how his mind worked far beyond just equations.
Oh yeah, he was a strong believer in a deterministic universe. He even quoted the philosopher Schopenhauer saying something like, "Man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills."
Right. And he went further, suggesting his own career path, his life trajectory, was determined by factors beyond his control. How do you square that? Sounds a bit fatalistic, maybe.
Well, for me, that deterministic view suggests our actions are ultimately the result of a long chain of cause and effect. Our will is shaped by countless internal and external factors we didn't choose.
So not that we don't feel like we're making choices.
Exactly. But that those choices are somehow predetermined. And the practical upshot, as he mentioned elsewhere, could be greater tolerance for others' actions, since everyone's just following this flow of cause and effect.
Yeah.
It definitely makes you rethink free will as we usually understand it.
It does. If our actions are ultimately determined, then concepts like blame and moral responsibility get really complicated, raise tricky ethical questions.
Did he grapple with that?
He acknowledged the complexity. He even said that, practically speaking, he had to act as if free will existed to function in society, to interact with people. It's like day to day, we operate with the idea of free will, even if philosophically he questioned it deeply.
And maybe that deterministic view helps explain his somewhat cautious perspective on psychoanalysis, which was really taking off in his time.
Yes, he had a measured view of Freud's work. He saw the importance of studying the mind, the unconscious, but he also expressed reservations.
What did he say specifically?
He noted that while materialist historians often overlooked psychic realities, Freud tended to overestimate their importance. He added, "It seems to me that psychoanalysis is not always wholesome."
Interesting balance in that critique. He wasn't dismissing it entirely.
No, but he saw a potential overemphasis on psychic factors, perhaps neglecting the biological, the physiological aspects of being human. He used an analogy elsewhere, saying analyzing leg muscles doesn't fully explain how we walk, illustrating his concern about overanalyzing the subconscious as if the mind were just a set of psychic mechanisms.
It's a view that acknowledges complexity, both mind and body influencing behavior. He valued Freud bringing the mind into focus, but remained critical, maybe due to his own scientific grounding in the laws of nature.
Now, a significant aspect of Einstein's life was his Jewish identity. He had some really interesting reflections on what it meant to be Jewish, especially with the rise of anti-Semitism in Europe.
Yes, he observed that despite Jews' incredible adaptability and efforts to integrate, even in modern civilization, the Jew is happiest if he remains a Jew.
And he stressed that this bond wasn't primarily religious, but based on a rich set of cultural traditions, a shared history spanning centuries. What does that reveal about his own connection to his Jewish identity?
It seems that for him, Jewish identity went far beyond just religion. It was about deep cultural ties, traditions passed down, a common history with its joys and immense hardships.
Right, a sense of belonging.
And saying the Jew is happiest remaining a Jew suggests he valued that cultural heritage, even in a world often pushing for assimilation, for melting away distinct identities into some homogeneous national one.
Exactly. It was an identity built on history, culture, and shared experience, not just faith. He saw it as a source of meaning, something that enriched his life and worldview, even though he wasn't religiously observant in the traditional sense.
And that sense of an interconnected world where our lives are somehow linked comes through in a really beautiful metaphor he used to describe fate, that force shaping our paths.
Yes, a metaphor expressing his belief in larger forces, cosmic laws shaping our lives from beginning to end. He wrote, "Everything is determined, the beginning as well as the end, by forces over which we have no control. Human beings, vegetables, or cosmic dust, we all dance to a mysterious tune, intoned in the distance by an invisible piper."
That's such a powerful image, isn't it? What does that evoke for you?
A profound sense of humility before the vastness of the universe and our small part in this grand cosmic dance. Recognizing forces beyond us, that our lives are intertwined with everything else, with the cosmos itself.
And the invisible piper.
That suggests an underlying order, maybe a purpose we can't fully grasp with our reason, but it's there, guiding this mysterious melody. It's a poetic take on determinism that doesn't strip away the beauty and mystery of existence. Even within that framework, there's room for awe, for meaning, for feeling part of something much larger.
And art also held an important place in Einstein's worldview. He had a distinct opinion on music, for example, that showed his appreciation for the more intuitive side of human experience.
Yes, he shared with the poet Rabindranath Tagore that really good music, whether of the East or of the West, cannot be analyzed. What does that suggest about art for him? Why would music escape rational analysis?
To me, he's saying the essence of great music goes beyond intellectual dissection, breaking down notes, chords, structures. It's something you feel, experience intuitively that hits you emotionally.
Right, it bypasses the purely logical mind.
The beauty lies precisely in its power to evoke feelings, connect people on a level beyond words and logic. It's like music speaks a universal language that reason can't fully translate.
Exactly. Music, like other art forms, touches aspects of our experience not fully accessible to reason. It communicates directly with our being, our deepest emotions. Trying to overanalyze it would be like trying to explain a sunset with mathematical formulas. You miss the point.
And despite all his genius, all these deep reflections, Einstein also had a surprisingly practical approach to the future.
Yes, when asked about the future, he replied very concisely, "I never think of the future. It comes soon enough." What does that simple phrase reveal about his philosophy? Almost sounds a bit Zen, doesn't it?
Totally. An emphasis on the present, on living in the now, not getting lost in speculation. Maybe a wisdom in not letting future anxieties consume you, but focusing on what's happening, what can be done right now. It's almost like saying, the future's coming anyway. Why waste energy overthinking it?
It's a perspective valuing immediate experience and present action over excessive worry about the unknown, living more in the here and now without being paralyzed by uncertainty.
Now, moving to a darker theme, Einstein lived through times of immense political turmoil, the rise of totalitarian regimes. He had very strong views on dictatorship and the absolute necessity of freedom for science and society to thrive.
Yes, he stated categorically. A dictatorship means muzzles all around and consequently stultification. Science can flourish only in an atmosphere of free speech. That's a powerful statement linking freedom of thought and communication directly to scientific progress.
It's a strong defense of free thought and expression as essential conditions for science, and by extension, human progress. In an authoritarian regime where debate, criticism, questioning are suppressed, the search for truth, the core of science, is inevitably stifled.
Without the freedom to explore ideas, challenge the status quo, science simply cannot prosper. It relies fundamentally on the free exchange of ideas, the ability to question dogma, experiment without fear, debate results openly.
Dictatorship, by imposing silence and conformity, creates a hostile environment, hinders new ideas, and ultimately harms everyone.
And that constant concern for human well-being was a driving force in his thinking. In a 1930 letter, he made a very relevant point about the relationship between applied science, which makes life easier, and our actual happiness.
Right. Echoing that earlier critique about technology as an axe. He wrote, "Why does this magnificent applied science, which saves work and makes life easier, bring us so little happiness? The simple answer runs. Because we have not yet learned to make sensible use of it. Concern for man himself and his fate must always form the chief interest of all technical endeavors."
That's a crucial warning about needing an ethical purpose, a humanistic direction in science and tech.
He seems to be saying scientific and technological progress alone doesn't guarantee happiness. You need ethical guidance, constant concern for the impact on human life, so these creations actually improve well-being instead of becoming sources of worry, inequality, or even destruction. Tech for tech's sake isn't enough. It needs to serve a higher purpose.
Exactly. Applied science, technological development should always serve humanity, seek solutions to major social problems, promote a more dignified, just life for all. Without that clear ethical compass, technology can easily stray and even turn against us.
Einstein also used a really potent metaphor about the importance of breaking free from our own fixed ideas, our ingrained beliefs, in order to truly learn and grow.
Yes, comparing the human mind to a prison, he said. One is trapped in the prison of one's own ideas. One must break out of it, and that requires considerable effort, and one must do it while still young in order to try testing one's ideas on reality.
That's a striking image, calling for mental openness, for constantly questioning our own beliefs and assumptions.
It's a call for intellectual humility and the courage to confront our convictions, even the ones we hold most dear. Being trapped in our own ideas, unwilling to let them be challenged, prevents us from learning, evolving, understanding reality in new, broader ways.
And testing those ideas against reality, interacting with the world and other perspectives, is fundamental for progress, both individually and collectively. It's through that confrontation with the outside that our ideas get refined, transformed, that we figure out what works and what needs rethinking.
And to talk about our limited ability to comprehend the divine, something he pondered so much, Einstein used a very interesting analogy involving a watchmaker.
"Yes," he said, "I see a clock, but I cannot envision the clockmaker. The human mind is unable to conceive of the four dimensions, so how can it conceive of a God before whom 1,000 years and 1,000 dimensions are as one?" That really highlights the transcendence of the divine, how something so far beyond our comprehension is hard for the human mind to grasp fully.
The clock analogy suggests a creator, an intelligence behind the universe's complexity and order.
But one that's as far beyond our full grasp as a 3D object is to a 2D mind. Just as we can't visualize dimensions beyond our familiar 3 plus time, how could we conceive of a being existing on a completely different scale?
Exactly. It acknowledges a fundamental mystery, something beyond our total conceptualization, beyond putting neatly into a box. It's an admission of our intellectual limits when facing the universe's vastness and complexity.
Einstein also took the opportunity to acknowledge and praise the work of another scientific giant, brilliant contemporary, Nikola Tesla.
Yes, in a letter for Tesla's 75th birthday, Einstein recognized him as an eminent pioneer in the field of high-frequency currents and congratulated him on the great successes of your life's work. That mutual respect between brilliant minds is always inspiring.
It's a testament to the admiration between these great thinkers, each contributing uniquely to advancing our understanding.
And Einstein's optimistic view of science's potential contrasted sharply with his deep concern about its destructive uses, especially given the world wars he lived through. He expressed this clearly in a message to the 1932 Disarmament Conference.
Yes, he wrote, "What the inventive genius of mankind has bestowed upon us in the last 100 years could have made human life carefree and happy if the development of the organizing power of man had been able to keep step with his technical advances. The discovery of marvelous means of production has not brought freedom, only anxieties and starvation." A really sharp critique of our societal inability to use progress wisely.
He saw a dangerous gap between rapid technological advance and slow social and political development. Technology in the hands of humanity still prone to conflict, inequality, destructive behavior becomes a threat, not a blessing, worsening problems instead of solving them.
And the solution, in Einstein's view, inevitably involved global disarmament and the relentless pursuit of peace.
Absolutely. He stated unequivocally that without disarmament, there can be no lasting peace, and that the arms race would certainly lead to further catastrophe. He saw creating strong global public opinion for disarmament as a moral responsibility for everyone.
A message that sadly remains incredibly relevant today. Now, shifting slightly to the methodology of science, there's that quote often attributed to Einstein about the importance of simplicity in theories.
Yes, the one that's become almost a mantra. Everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. It's an adaptation of an idea he expressed differently sometimes, but it perfectly captures that quest for elegance, clarity, and precision in science.
The need to find concise, clear explanations, but without oversimplifying to the point where you lose touch with reality's complexity. Finding that delicate balance between simplicity and necessary depth.
Exactly. Science aims for models that are both elegant in formulation and capable of explaining the most phenomena with the fewest basic premises. It's the search for the most efficient solution, solving the problem directly and clearly without adding needless complexity.
Einstein also had a rather original idea about how young scientists could get more time for deep reflection, which he thought was crucial.
Yes, he suggested that occupations involving some isolation and little physical or intellectual strain, like, say, being a lighthouse keeper, could be valuable opportunities for talented young people to dedicate themselves to thinking about complex scientific problems, especially in math or philosophy.
It highlights the importance of undisturbed time and space for contemplation, something increasingly rare in a competitive academic world, often focused on constant output. He valued that creative idleness, that pause for ideas to mature.
He recognized that true innovation often requires deep contemplation, free from daily distractions, time for the mind to wander and connect ideas in unexpected ways.
And regarding the nature of science itself, Einstein had a surprisingly down-to-earth view. He didn't see it as totally separate from our everyday thinking.
No, he stated that the whole of science is nothing more than a refinement of everyday thinking. It's a way of making science seem more accessible, showing it's not some mysterious thing for geniuses, but an extension of our natural curiosity, our attempt to understand what's around us.
That science takes our innate curiosity, our drive to make sense of the world, understand cause and effect, and refines it through rigorous methods, formulating hypotheses, experimenting, building theories, like taking our intuitive thought and leveling it up.
Exactly. Science would then be a sophisticated extension of our innate ability to observe, ask questions, seek patterns, and find logical explanations for everyday phenomena.
And that search for patterns, for underlying order, leads to one of Einstein's most profound and recurring reflections: his awe at the very comprehensibility of the world.
Yes, he expressed this awe in various ways, saying things like, "The eternally incomprehensible thing about the world is its comprehensibility. The most incomprehensible thing about the world is that it is comprehensible at all. The eternal mystery of the world is its comprehensibility. The fact that it is comprehensible is a miracle." A deep philosophical reflection on the inherent order we find.
It's amazing that the world, in all its apparent complexity, can be understood by the human mind, through the language of math, through physical laws. It's like there's a fundamental resonance between our reason and the universe's structure. Why do nature's laws reveal themselves in a way we can grasp? That fascinated Einstein.
Exactly. That comprehensibility isn't obvious, not something to take for granted. For Einstein, this ability of the human mind to unlock nature's secrets, find logical order in apparent chaos, was a source of constant wonder, almost miraculous, pointing perhaps to an underlying intelligence in the universe.
Now, returning to a pivotal moment in history, Einstein played a role, albeit indirect and later regretted, in the development of the atomic bomb through that famous letter to President Roosevelt.
Yes, the letter warning Roosevelt about uranium's potential as a powerful new energy source, and, crucially, the possibility it could be used to build bombs of unprecedented destructive power. He mentioned the work of scientists like Fermi and Szilard and expressed grave concern that Nazi Germany might develop such a weapon first.
A moment of huge responsibility for science,
Yeah.
where scientific knowledge met global, political, and ethical implications, with consequences that define the 20th century and still haunt us.
Exactly. And as we'll touch on later, it was a decision he carried with immense weight throughout his life, eventually acknowledging his mistake and deeply lamenting the bomb's use.
Speaking of principles and how to live, Einstein had a rather unique take on rules of conduct, kind of counterintuitive.
Yes, he claimed to have only two rules he considered principles. The first is, have no rules. The second is, be independent of the opinion of others. A pretty strong statement about individual autonomy, freedom of thought, and carving your own path without excessive reliance on external norms or what others think.
A rejection of dogma, of ready-made formulas for living, and a high value placed on intellectual independence, forming your own opinions based on your own reflection and experience. Almost an invitation to think for yourself and not fear going against the grain.
Exactly. He prioritized individual freedom, seeking ethical conduct based on one's own conscience and values, rather than blindly following external rules imposed by society or authority.
And what did Einstein see as the real driver of human actions? What was the motivating force behind everything we do?
He believed that everything that the human race has done and thought is concerned with the satisfaction of deeply felt needs and the assuagement of pain. All that men do or think concerns the satisfaction of the needs they feel or the escape from pain. A pretty fundamental view placing basic needs and the pursuit of well-being at the center of it all.
A perspective that sees our most primal needs, seeking pleasure, avoiding pain as the great engines of human history and culture, driving both our noblest efforts and our most selfish or destructive behaviors.
Exactly. Understanding these basic motivations is key to understanding social movements, cultural developments, scientific advances, even how society organizes and evolves over time.
Now, a concept that's absolutely central to understanding Einstein's worldview, his unique perspective on the universe and our place in it, is what he called the cosmic religious feeling.
Yes, he described this feeling as a profound experience of unity with the universe, a perception of the marvelous order existing in both nature and the world of thought, a sense of being part of something vast and mysterious.
Importantly, this feeling didn't involve belief in a personal anthropomorphic God who intervenes in human affairs, right?
Correct. He saw figures like Democritus, St. Francis of Assisi, and the philosopher Spinoza as examples of people deeply inspired by this cosmic religious experience. It's a religiosity transcending specific dogmas, doctrines, and rituals.
Focused instead on reverent awe for the cosmos's vastness, beauty, and intelligibility, and a deep sense of belonging to that totality, connection with everything that exists.
Exactly. For him, the function of art and science was precisely to awaken and sustain this cosmic religious feeling in those receptive to it, that capacity to marvel at the universe's mysteries and feel that profound connection.
In his 1930 essay, What I Believe, Einstein elaborates on some of his core principles, giving a clearer picture of his worldview at that time.
Yes, in that piece, he again expresses his disbelief in free will, as we discussed, and how that conviction fostered tolerance towards others' actions. He also shares quite personally about his need for solitude, his lack of desire for constant close association, and his growing craving for isolation.
That's refreshingly honest about his own nature. Maybe surprising for those who picture a genius always surrounded by intellectuals. But that solitude seemed crucial for his creative process, his deep reflection.
It seems so. He also lays out his political ideal, democracy, with a strong emphasis on respecting individuality, protecting freedoms, and rejecting any form of hero worship or personality cults. And he voices his profound disdain for violence, war, and any kind of commanded heroism.
A clear political vision, grounded in solid ethical principles and deep respect for human dignity.
And in his famous text, The World as I See It, Mein Weltbild, published slightly later, he revisits some of these central themes.
Yes, he again quotes that Schopenhauer line about the will as a constant inspiration. He talks about his deep attraction to a simple life, far from luxury and ostentation, and his sharp criticism of class differences and social inequalities.
And he reaffirms his disbelief in free will, noting how this deterministic view paradoxically lessened his own sense of personal responsibility and allowed him to face life with a bit more humor and lightness. He also describes himself in this text as a lone traveler, someone who follows his own inner compass, even if it distances him somewhat from intense social life.
That sense of detachment, needing solitude to connect with his ideas and the universe, seems like a defining trait, despite his engagement with important social and political issues.
And that capacity to marvel at the unknown, to feel that deep admiration for the universe's mysteries, was for him the very essence of both art and science. Humanity's two great paths to meaning and understanding.
Yes, he stated it very clearly. The most beautiful experience we can have is the mysterious. It is the fundamental emotion which stands at the cradle of true art and true science. He saw that awe, that wonder before what we don't yet understand, as fundamental to the human experience, driving us to explore, create, and seek knowledge.
Exactly. For him, losing that ability to wonder, becoming indifferent to the world's mysteries, was like being as good as dead, having lost something incredibly precious, that spark of curiosity and enchantment.
And regarding his concept of God and the immortality of the soul, he was very direct, leaving no ambiguity about his stance on these perennial human questions.
Yes, he stated categorically he couldn't imagine a God who rewards and punishes his creatures, a being interfering in individual fates. And he also expressed his disbelief in the idea that the individual survives the death of their body, the kind of afterlife many religions propose.
A view consistent with his rejection of a personal God and a more materialistic perspective on existence, where consciousness is tied to the brain and ceases with death.
However, this lack of belief in a traditional God or immortality didn't stop him from finding beauty and meaning in contemplating the mystery of conscious life, the universe's incredible structure, the quest to understand nature's laws.
Right. He said it was enough for him to contemplate the mystery of conscious life, perpetuating itself through all eternity, to reflect upon the marvelous structure of the universe which we can dimly perceive, and to try humbly to comprehend even an infinitesimal part of the intelligence manifested in nature. It was in that search for understanding, that awe of the cosmos, that he found profound meaning.
That humility before the universe's vastness was a constant, and he also had some sharp observations about the academic world, about education and scientific research.
Yes. He noted with some irony that numerous are the academic chairs, but rare are wise and noble teachers. Numerous are the Dutzenware, common goods, that nature produces, but the finer things, she seldom brings forth. A subtle critique of potential superficiality in teaching and the rarity of true genius, that ability to inspire and transform students.
A reflection on the quality of education, distinguishing between the quantity of degrees and publications and the depth of knowledge, the genuine wisdom a teacher can impart.
In My Credo, written in 1932, Einstein returns to some of his fundamental principles, reaffirming his convictions about the world and how we should live.
Yes, he again mentions his awareness of belonging to an invisible community of those seeking truth, beauty, and justice. He restates his disbelief in free will and how it influences his tolerance for human failings.
And he expresses his passion for social justice, his deep aversion to unnecessary compulsion and exploitation, alongside his staunch pacifism and condemnation of militarism.
He concludes this credo by supporting the ideal of democracy, despite its flaws, and stressing the vital importance of social equality and economic protection for individuals, especially the vulnerable.
A consistent, humanistic, and deeply ethical worldview.
And he had a keen observation about a common human tendency, our difficulty looking inward rather than focusing outward.
Oh yes, he put it bluntly. Most people would rather look outward than inward, for in the latter case, they see only a dark hole, which means nothing. A reflection on the difficulty of introspection, the fear of confronting our own inner emptiness, our shadows.
An uncomfortable truth about our tendency to avoid deep self-knowledge, preferring distractions from the outside world over facing our internal issues.
The Einstein way was also marked by a certain humor, an ability to take things lightly, even in tough times, and he had a particular take on the rise of Nazism.
Yes, he enjoyed a good joke, used sarcasm to deal with absurdity. He mocked the Nazi professors who condemned his relativity theory, even saying he hadn't cared much about being Jewish until Hitler made him so brutally aware of it.
A way of coping with persecution and hatred, using intelligence and a sort of ironic detachment.
In his essay on the method of theoretical physics, he vividly describes the joy of scientific discovery, that magic moment when the pieces finally click.
Yes, he talks about years of anxious searching in the dark, groping for answers, and the final emergence into light, the sudden clarity that illuminates the whole problem. An experience, he said, only those who've lived it can truly grasp.
And in his notes on the origin of the general theory of relativity, he also shares some of that arduous yet deeply rewarding process of scientific quest and discovery, the intuitions, mistakes, frustrations, and insights that led to that revolutionary theory.
In one letter, he shows surprising humility about his own struggles with mathematics, something most people might not imagine given his genius in theoretical physics.
Yes, he wrote to a friend, "Do not worry about your difficulties in mathematics. I can assure you mine are still greater." A reminder that even the most brilliant minds face challenges, have their own struggles and limitations.
Einstein also passionately advocated for international cooperation to maintain peace, especially after World War II, when the world was divided by opposing ideologies.
Yes, he firmly believed that only through permanent and faithful cooperation between the United States, Great Britain, and Russia could lasting peace be secured, avoiding new large-scale conflicts and building a safer future.
And he even acknowledged the Soviet Union's crucial role in fighting Nazism and the equality he observed among the diverse national groups within the country at that time.
A geopolitical view based on the need to overcome ideological differences for the greater goal of human survival and a more peaceful, just world.
He also expressed some bemusement at his own fame, the adoration he received, jokingly asking, "Why is it that nobody understands me and everybody likes me?"
A humorous reflection on the irony of being world famous and admired, yet perhaps having his actual ideas not truly grasped by most people.
Regarding atomic energy, after the horrors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, he stated its release hadn't created a fundamentally new problem, but merely made solving an existing one, humanity's tendency towards violence and destruction, far more urgent.
The urgency of controlling this destructive power through politics, ethics, international cooperation before it consumed us all.
And when asked about humanity's apparent inability to politically control the terrifying force of atomic energy, he replied with a somewhat pessimistic line. "That is simple, my friend. It is because politics is more difficult than physics."
A rather melancholy observation on the inherent complexity of human affairs, power relations, conflicts of interest, compared to the relative order and predictability of the natural laws he studied.
He also advocated for a strong world authority with the power to prevent wars and ensure humanity's survival in the nuclear age, a vision of international order based on collaboration, moving beyond absolute national sovereignty.
On Le Corbusier's modular, an architectural proportion system based on the human body, he concisely said it was a scale of proportions which makes the bad difficult and the good easy.
An appreciation for a system aimed at facilitating more harmonious and functional spaces for people.
Einstein always valued imagination as a fundamental tool for scientific thought, sometimes placing it even above factual knowledge.
Yes, he stated, "The gift of fantasy has meant more to me than my talent for absorbing positive knowledge." An emphasis on creativity. The ability to think beyond the known, to visualize new possibilities is the engine of scientific innovation.
Regarding the Christian maxim to love your enemy, he offered a somewhat unique perspective rooted in his deep belief in causal determinism.
He said something like, "I cannot hate him because he must do what he does." A deterministic view connected to his overall philosophy, but raising complex questions about responsibility and free will.
He also stressed the importance of sticking firmly to physical reality as the starting point and anchor for scientific theories.
The need for scientific concepts, however abstract, to always relate back to the observable world, to the space and time we inhabit.
For him, the relationship between epistemology, the study of knowledge and science, was one of deep interdependence, each influencing and shaping the other.
He saw epistemology without contact with science as empty, and science without epistemological reflection as naive and potentially confused.
In his contribution to the book Albert Einstein, Philosopher-Scientist, he explores this intricate relationship in detail, showing how our understanding of how we know affects what we come to know scientifically.
And in his 1941 essay, Science and Religion, he seeks to define the domains of each field and how they relate, trying to move beyond the idea of inevitable conflict.
He defines a religious person as devoted to superpersonal objects and goals, and a religiously enlightened person as one freed from selfish desires. He argues conflict is impossible when defined properly, as science deals with what is, facts, while religion concerns what should be, values, ethics.
He also highlights reciprocal relationships and dependencies, religion often providing ethical goals, science offering means to achieve them.
And he emphasizes faith in the world's rationality as the very foundation of science, that belief the universe is governed by laws discoverable by reason. He also notes science's limitation in determining the ought, the moral values that should guide us.
He sees religion's goal as freeing people from the bondage of selfish desires, while science can indirectly contribute by providing deeper knowledge of human nature and our place in the universe.
He shares childhood memories, the compass, Euclidean geometry as true wonders that sparked his scientific curiosity and awe.
And he describes his criteria for an impressive scientific theory: simplicity of basic premises, diversity of phenomena explained, and broad scope.
He mentions his search for a universal formal principle leading to relativity, and also expresses his deep contempt for the military system and war.
He values the example of great moral characters throughout history and the crucial role of the creative individual in societal progress.
He praises George Bernard Shaw for his intelligent humor and ability to educate through art. And he reflects on the great responsibility of the U.S. in post-WWII international politics.
He concludes that essay with a somewhat melancholic observation: few are those who see with their own eyes and feel with their own hearts, and a sharp critique of bureaucracy as detrimental to creative work.
He also comments on the essence of the teachings of Jesus and the prophets as a guide for healing social ills, for building a more just and compassionate society.
In his 1949 article, Why Socialism?, Einstein offers a critical analysis of capitalism and argues for a socialist model of economic and social organization.
He starts by critiquing what he calls the predatory phase of human development and the limits of classical economics in understanding socialism's essence. He sees socialism as an ethical social end, an ideal to strive for collective well-being, acknowledging the complex human nature, both solitary and social.
He highlights the individual's deep dependence on society and how, under capitalism, this dependence is often felt as a threat, breeding competition and inequality.
He explains the worker-capitalist relationship, arguing the worker isn't paid the real value of their product. He considers the inherent economic anarchy of capitalism the root of many social evils, pointing to problems like production for profit over need, unemployment, instability, waste, and the erosion of social consciousness.
He advocates for a planned socialist economy and an education system geared towards social goals, but crucially adds caveats about the risk of state overreach enslaving the individual, stressing the need for democratic checks against bureaucracy.
He notes the tendency of private capital to concentrate, forming oligarchies controlling the economy and politics. And he points to the control of information sources by private capital, making it hard for ordinary citizens to reach objective conclusions.
In the 1950s, near the end of his life, Einstein continued to voice deep concerns about the nuclear threat and the urgent need for peace.
He saw seeking peace while preparing for war as fundamentally incompatible. He viewed Mahatma Gandhi as the most enlightened figure of his time in political and social action, championing non-participation in evil and nonviolent resistance as effective paths for change.
He emphasized the need for humanity's moral development, a global ethical culture, as essential for our species' survival given the destructive power we'd created.
In his note for the 15th edition of his book, Relativity, 1952, he revisits the idea that humans are part of a whole, an interconnected universe, and our perception of separation, of isolated individuality, is an illusion.
He sees the effort to free ourselves from this illusion, to recognize this fundamental unity as the essence of true religion, the path to inner peace and harmonious coexistence.
In a 1950 condolence letter to Robert J. Marcus, he expands on this, calling the illusion of separateness a kind of mental prison, and seeing liberation as expanding our circle of compassion, connecting with others' suffering and joy.
Einstein had a curious opinion about pipe smoking, which he apparently found helpful for calm judgment.
And he criticized the overemphasis on purely intellectual development in education at the expense of solid ethical values. Knowledge without ethics, for him, could be dangerous.
He spent some of his final years searching for a unified field theory that could deduce the existence and properties of elementary particles, a grand goal he didn't achieve.
And he always stressed the importance of the humanities in education, not just specialized scientific knowledge, but understanding history, philosophy, literature, for a fuller view of the world and the human condition.
He described the strange feeling of aging as a gradual loss of identification with the present, becoming like a distant observer of one's own life.
And he left us a stark warning. The world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch them without doing anything.
He reflected on the two great achievements of Western science, basic laws and logical method, and why similar scientific development hadn't occurred in ancient China.
He found a certain personal satisfaction in his stubbornness, in defending his own ideas even when they went against the mainstream.
And he also shared thoughts on the fear of death, a universal experience he faced with a degree of serenity.
There's also his famous 1954 letter to Gutkind, offering valuable insights into his views on God and religion, though avoiding dogmatic details.
He even expressed some disillusionment with the academic career compared to more independent professions like plumber or peddler, which might offer more autonomy.
He acknowledged the mistake of writing the Roosevelt letter about the bomb, justifying it by the historical context, the grave danger posed by Nazi Germany.
He reflected on the increasingly abstract nature of modern physics theory, moving further from everyday intuition.
And in his 1954 collection, Ideas and Opinions, he offers a retrospective look at the development of scientific thought during his lifetime.
In a moving letter to the family of his friend Michel Besso in March 1955, shortly before his own death, he described the distinction between past, present, and future as merely a stubborn illusion of our consciousness.
He recalled his youthful thought experiment, wondering what would happen if he chased a light beam, a question that led towards relativity. And he highlighted intuition as the true mother of invention, even more than pure logic.
He saw his work at the Byrne Patent Office as a blessing, giving him free time to think about physics without the constant pressure for results he saw in academia.
He analyzed the Cold War conflict as a power struggle between superpowers, intensified by the threat of atomic energy.
In one of his last interviews for Life magazine in 1955, he stressed the fundamental importance of never ceasing to question, keeping curiosity and wonder alive.
And he left timeless advice. Try not to become a man of success, but rather try to become a man of value, prioritizing contribution over personal recognition.
He expressed doubts about whether the field theory he sought could adequately explain quantum phenomena.
In his essay on Truth and Justice, he discusses the indivisibility of ethical principles, the importance of honesty, even in small things. He stresses the indispensability of free communication for scientific progress and the need for tolerance among truth seekers. He also reflects on our conscious acts originating from deep desires and fears, and thought's role in organizing instincts and actions.
In his brief text, The Goal of Human Existence, he tackles that fundamental question of meaning that has always accompanied humanity.
In his 1953 essay for Rabbi Leo Baek, he strongly criticizes those who presume to be judges of truth and knowledge, and elevates those who help others without fear or aggression, like history's great moral leaders.
In Ideas and Opinions, he expresses the sheer joy he found in contemplating and understanding nature, calling it the universe's most beautiful gift.
And in his final words, spoken just before his death in April 1955, he expressed his wish to go when he wanted, and to do so with elegance and dignity.
The famous Russell-Einstein Manifesto, released in 1955, posed the crucial question for humanity in the nuclear age: the end of the human race or the renunciation of war.
It makes an urgent plea for people to think as human beings, members of one species, above divisions of nations or ideologies. And it notes how the struggle between communism and anti-communism was overshadowing other conflicts and hindering peace.
In a comment to his friend Janos Plesch, he remarked that the gift of fantasy meant more to him than the talent for absorbing knowledge. And he used the interesting metaphor of a blind beetle crawling on a globe to explain how he arrived at his scientific discoveries.
When his son Edward asked why he was so famous, Einstein's simple, direct answer was, "By luck, I noticed the curvature." Characteristic humility.
About first love, he expressed difficulty explaining such complex biological phenomena solely through chemistry and physics, hinting perhaps something more was involved.
He commented on the devil's penalty associated with life's pleasures, perhaps alluding to the consequences that often follow moments of great joy.
He felt the mental effort required by quantum theory was even greater than for relativity, given its more abstract and counterintuitive nature.
He got irritated when his quotes were used out of context to support atheism, clarifying his view of God was more complex, tied to cosmic harmony.
He advised linking one's life to a passionate goal as a path to happiness and meaning.
He actually read and commented on Helena Blavatsky's The Secret Doctrine, a key theosophical text, and recommended it to physicist Werner Heisenberg, showing his openness to different ways of thinking.
In a travel diary entry describing a storm at sea, he shared feeling simultaneously insignificant before nature's power and joyful to be part of something so grand.
He valued the passionate effort in seeking truth, even if arduous and lonely, seeing it as a form of liberation from the ego.
About the Earth's age and eventual end, he replied concisely with a touch of humor, showing his cosmic perspective on time.
He described the realm of art and science as a space where the world ceases to be a stage for personal hopes and fears, and we instead admire and question reality freely.
He denied any anthropomorphic purpose in nature, seeing it as a magnificent structure inspiring humility and respect.
He showed skepticism towards the mystical trends of his time, like theosophy and spiritualism, preferring a more rational, evidence-based approach.
He believed nothing truly valuable arises from mere ambition, but rather from love, dedication, and a deep sense of purpose.
He found joy and hope in the activities of the younger generation, seeing their energy and ideas as revitalizing forces.
He deeply valued the importance of moral standard bearers throughout history like Buddha, Moses, Jesus, placing their ethical influence even above the discoveries of objective truth by scientists.
He used the metaphor of a shipwreck survivor in a letter to describe disorientation and the need to find new meaning when crisis disrupts our daily lives.
In a 1933 letter to an unemployed musician, he offered advice on finding joy and inner peace through reading, nature contemplation, and friendship with animals, reminding him that often the most refined and noble spirits find themselves alone.
He expressed amazement at the incredible advance of scientific knowledge since 1900, but also some concern about potentially diminishing our capacity to truly grasp its implications.
In Einstein and the Poet, his conversation with Tagore, he emphasizes intuition as a path to true knowledge, often superior to pure empiricism. He shares his deep faith in creation's harmony as his main scientific motivation and describes his cosmic religious feelings, rejecting an anthropomorphic God.
He worries about traditional religion's inability to prevent violence, focusing on transforming the human heart. He defines his God as what makes him a humanitarian and expresses pride in his Jewish heritage, while also voicing fears about America's future, especially regarding race.
He defines his cosmic religion based on the universe's rationality and love for fellow beings, seeing the spirit's main task as freeing humans from ego. He comments on our affinity with animals and reflects on Hiroshima. He clarifies he's not a mystic, but feels humility and has known cosmic religious feelings through science.
He reiterates the importance of questioning and wonder and faith in an eternal world and our ability to perceive it. He interprets Jesus' kingdom of God as referring to the small group of intellectually and ethically valuable people and criticizes fools in clerical garb.
He saw exaggerated nationalism as a greater danger than mythical religious forces. He describes scientific research based on determinism but also faith in natural laws. He concludes the pursuit of science leads to a special religious feeling, defining religious as trust in reality's rational nature, with science solely determining what is.
He expresses wanting to know God's thoughts through nature's laws, describes his view as close to Spinoza's, centered on human problems, and finishes by saying formulating a problem is more essential than its solution.
And regarding those disputed quotes, often attributed to Einstein.
Right, it's important to be cautious. The validity of some is uncertain, with conflicting evidence or attributions to others.
Like the 2 ways to live life.
Yes, that one's status is questionable. Same for replacing success with service, possibly a paraphrase. Common sense being prejudice attributed to others, maybe Einstein agreed. Compound interest as the most powerful force uncertain, attributed elsewhere before.
The advice about reading fairy tales for future scientists.
That highlights imagination, but its direct attribution is debated. The only 2 things are infinite, quote, uncertain attribution. Earlier versions exist. The atom's power changing everything except our thinking various versions, likely origin unclear. And the consequences of his discoveries beyond science and that supposed formula for success, X plus Y plus Z.
Also in that disputed category. It's crucial to cite these carefully and acknowledge their uncertain status.
So after weaving through this incredible tapestry of Albert Einstein's thoughts, what aspect resonates most strongly with you?
Is it the relentless quest to understand nature, the deep reflection on our role in society, or that eternal search for meaning and purpose?
Einstein's words really invite us to dive deep into our own questions. What lion, what vast unknown do you feel you still need to discover on your own journey?
Share your reflections on this deep dive on social media using the hashtag #MergoloProfundo. Which quotes stood out most to you?
And what other themes from Einstein's life and work would you like us to explore in future deep dives? Your curiosity guides us.
Guys, see you in another podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel.